everyone. Welcome to the Flameless Fireside Podcast. We're grateful that you're here with us tonight. Tonight we have a great show. We're going to talk about the difference between love and lust and counterfeit emotions in general. We're going to talk about three different pairs, but mainly love and lust. And we are going to be speaking with Curtis Morley, who is the author of the upcoming book, Counterfeit Emotions. So thank you, Curtis, for joining with us today, and we're excited to have you on. I am Celeste. I'll be your main host tonight, and I am here with the amazing Joyce Rigsby, the handsome Everett Ulbricht. Got to get your last name in there. And then, of course, the beautiful Katie Youngwes. So, Curtis, we've had you on a couple times before. We're super excited to have you back. Why don't you give us a really quick rundown of your history as an author and how you came about this concept of counterfeit emotions and where you are on that process with your book.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
So I about a year and a half ago, I wrote this book. I wrote this book called The Entrepreneur's Paradox, a book focused on entrepreneurship, etc. And in the middle of writing the follow-up, when the book hit the Wall Street Journal bestseller list, my publisher said, "Hey, why don't we do a 3-book series?" In the middle of writing my next book, which was called The Timeline of Business, some really tragic things happened. And one of my best friends, Jerry Williamson, he took his life, and it really shook my world. And I called my publisher and I said, "Hey, I need to write a very different book that has nothing to do with business. I need to write a book that would have helped Jerry still be here." And that book is called Counterfeit Emotions. I truly believe that if Jerry knew the difference between pain and misery, two of those pairings, and guilt and shame, that he would still be here. And I'm not okay that he's not. And so it is my new mission to make sure that we do understand the difference, that there is such a thing as an authentic emotion. And then every single authentic emotion, the ones that serve us, the ones that help us get to where we want to go, every single one of those has a counterfeit that tries and sneaks in and puts on the clothing of that original or that authentic emotion, and tries to make us believe that what we're feeling, that counterfeit emotion, is the authentic. And that's what creates these destructive cycles of disconnection in our lives. And there is one emotion, just one, that has no counterfeit, and that emotion is peace.
Awesome. When you were explaining that, I kind of thought about how like these counterfeit emotions are probably the product of Satan trying to mimic the authentic emotions, which are the product of Christ. And I wonder if that's kind of what it is. We're trying to separate what is Christ trying to have us feel and experience versus what Satan would have us feel and understand, supposedly what we're feeling, and having a different definition of that feeling. Is that kind of your take on it? Or
That's exactly it. Satan is the father of all lies. He's the father of all counterfeits. He is the great liar. He is the great counterfeit. And it's interesting because all our lives, I don't know if everyone here feels the same, but I was taught opposite emotions. I was taught that here is love and here is hate. Love, don't hate. But I was never taught about those emotions that slide right up next to the original emotion and look and act and feel like that original emotion. I was never taught that, hey, yeah, don't hate and be careful, because these are the sneaky ones. Those emotions that slide in and say, I am the original emotion. Don't pay attention to that goodness over there. I am the original emotion. Those are the ones that are so sneaky that we're often fooled. And it's crazy to think no one would ever accept a counterfeit dollar bill, right? Knowingly. Yet we accept these counterfeit emotions into our lives all the time.
Yeah, I kind of feel like with the authentic versus the counterfeit, there's a contrast. Well, on the normal, like love, hate, let me say that right. Love, hate, huge contrast. Whereas if the authentic and the counterfeit are so close together, and easily misunderstood because they are similar in nature or have been wrapped to deliver to look similar in nature. That's where the challenge would lie, right? Just the confusion between, gosh, there's not this huge contrast between these two emotions like love and hate. They're just very close, and you're right. It's like a sneaky little shadow that Satan's added to Christ's authentic emotion.
Yeah, I love that word. I love shadow, because that's what it is. It has no substance. It's this misty gray, no substance, where the authentic emotion is where Christ lives. And yeah, that's a really great way of putting it.
Oh, thank you. So before we start delving into love versus lust, I know you wanted to give us an overview of kind of how to recognize the counterfeit emotions versus the authentic emotions, so that in those moments when we're like, what am I feeling? That there's a pattern, there's a system that we can figure out or use to figure out what it is we're feeling, and if that is real, if it's not, and how to handle the situation better than sadly your friend dealt with, handling it in the wrong way. So do you want to go ahead and show us that or talk about that?
Yeah, I would love to. So the question is, what is a counterfeit emotion, right? What is that? And I've got just a couple slides here that we can pull up. So what is a counterfeit emotion? A counterfeit emotion is an emotion that looks, acts, and feels like an authentic emotion, but creates a destructive pattern of disconnection in our lives. And there's a couple key words. Pattern is one of those. It creates a destructive pattern. We'll dive into why that is. And so that leads to the question, what's an authentic emotion? Well, there's four criteria. There's four criteria to know if what we're feeling is an authentic emotion or if it's an counterfeit. And so the first criteria is connection. And you'll notice they all end in shun. Tried to make it easy to remember.
Nice.
Connection, evaluation. The first one is connection. Does this emotion connect me to you? Does it connect me to myself? And actually, that's the first step. Let me put them in order. Does it connect me to me, my true divine self? Does it connect me to God? Does it connect me to others? And does it connect me to the truth? There's four connections that it has to connect us to. Authentic emotions, and this proves out true in every case. The authentic emotions always connect. They always connect us either to ourselves, God, others, or the truth. And the counterfeits always disconnect. And so that's the first one. The second one is direction. And direction, there's only three directions that an authentic emotion will take us. It takes us forward, brings me forward, it takes me upward, and it brings me together. Those are the directions that it takes. And it's really interesting because the counterfeits, the direction the counterfeit emotions take us is back to the emotion. So if you look at like pain and misery, really important to understand the difference there. The saying is no pain, no gain, because pain takes us somewhere. Pain actually moves us in a direction that we want to go. Then misery loves company because it has to have more of itself to spin back on. And that's the same thing with our topic tonight, love versus lust. Lust needs more lust to survive. And the direction that counterfeit emotions take you is simply right back to that emotion. The motivation aspect is this emotion based in two things, love and surrender, or is it based in fear and control? Really easy way to identify if that's a counterfeit or an authentic. And finally, evaluation. What does this emotion value me at? And what does it value you at? If it values us as divine, most likely it's an authentic emotion. If it values us as worthless, that's where you got to step away from that emotion and really evaluate where you're at.
All right, great. Thank you. So do you want to talk about each of those individually as a group? Would you mind us doing that?
Yeah. Let's
Okay. So let's just start talking about the connection aspect. Give us a little quick rundown of what you just said.
Yeah. So yeah, you bet. So that connection, like let's take any of the pairings, they always connect, and you can feel it. You can feel when you have that connection with another person. You can feel when you're connecting to your divine self. You can feel that connection to God, and it's like guilt versus shame. I know we've talked about that one on
Yep,
the.
we have.
It's guilt actually connects me. If I hurt you in some way, I want to connect with you to make amends, to make reparations. I need to connect to you. Shame does the opposite. Shame sits back here and says, hide. Don't
Mhm.
let anyone know. And it disconnects.
I
Yeah.
kind of feel like, oh, go ahead. Go ahead,
No,
Everett.
please.
Oh, was that Everett or was that you? Because I was cutting somebody off. Anyway, so I kind of feel like when you say connection, when I think of, because I'm kind of trying to take this into like a gospel perspective, I kind of feel like, that's what Satan wants us to do is disconnect, right? He doesn't want us to connect with our Savior or anyone else, because the more alone we are, or the more disconnected we are from others, from the church, from our friends, from our family, the Savior, all of those things, the more we can get stuck and not move forward, right? Like we kind of get in this little spiral or this rut, and it becomes like this battle with our own self thoughts and our own feelings. And the only way out usually is to reach out to someone else to help you through those situations. And it's ironic that through these counterfeit emotions, Satan has kind of made it like, oh, no, you need to be alone. You need to be disconnected. Because I think that's the tool he uses to kind of keep you away from those situations that could actually get you up and out of that emotion.
Yeah. Oh, it's so true. And you look at what happened with the pandemic. Right now, we're in a new pandemic. Today, we're at the highest suicide rate since the Great Depression.
Hmm.
Almost 100 years. We're at the very pinnacle of suicides, and it's because in the pandemic we were told to shut our doors, shut our businesses, shut our churches, don't show your smile.
Right.
We were told disconnect. And if you look at connection itself, there actually many psychologists are listing it as the final human need: food, water, shelter, and at the bottom of the list is connection.
Really?
Actually, several are putting it at the top of the list. If
Wow.
you take a baby and give them everything they need except for human touch, the baby dies.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, the thing, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, have you ever seen that study that they did with they had like a baby chimpanzee and they take it away from its mother
Oh,
and they put like even just a stuffed animal in the pen with it, and it will cling to that because it needs exactly what you're saying, just some sort of connection. Like it's just ingrained in all of us, and even animals, it's a need for that. I don't know about sharks. Sharks might not need it, but the rest of us definitely need it. So
Well, I think one of the things that's interesting about the pandemic is that connection became something different to some degree, because we started the sort of electronic sort of like being able to reach out to people because we didn't have the connection. I mean, I remember the depression that I went into when church and work both said at the same time, stop coming. And, I'm a person who lives alone, and I'm happy to live alone most of the time. But the fact that I couldn't leave the house ever,
wow.
then like a little Zoom meeting became this tremendous connection that, like it's not the best quality, but it was all we had. And so we began to have sort of this connection electronically, which it might not be the healthiest, but it was, I think many people made new friends, found new ways to do things, because they craved that connection, because it wasn't good enough to have meetings with colleagues where all you did was hear each other's voice. It was so much better to be able to see each other's faces, to be able to have that expression, to really feel connected to each other.
And to see the smiles, because if you guys are virtual, you could take off the mask. And I believe that is, like we started this podcast in the middle of the pandemic, and it was essential to many, many people to have that connection, to come and find a place where they felt connected. So I agree with Curtis, like connection is like so key. And I do believe that Satan, knowing that that's a key, will try everything in his power to disconnect at any point in time, anywhere along our paths, just to kind of derail us. All right, let's move on to the second one really quick. Let's do direction. Give us a little quick rundown. We'll see what we can interact with that on.
Direction. I think my slides might illustrate it really well.
Okay,
so if we jump back over to there, so direction, authentic emotions, they move us forward, upward, or bring us together. If we look at counterfeit emotions, all they do is spin.
Yep.
All they do is spin. And if you look at it from the top, you see this spinning circle. If you pull it up in 3D, it's actually a spiral. And it's going down and down and down. And each time bringing it back to that emotion. Bringing it back to that emotion. It's so self-serving. All of the counterfeits are self-serving emotions. Anxiety has to build anxiety. That's its nature. Lying, if you lie, you have to tell more lies. If you're nice, you have to continue being nice. Misery loves company. It's just, and so understanding that, what direction is this emotion taking me? Is this emotion taking me into courage, abundance, connection, or is it taking me to a place of isolation and right back to that same emotion?
Yeah. And I love your spiral representation, because if you're at the surface where you're kind of confused between which is it authentic or counterfeit, the lower you go on that counterfeit, it's almost like you get farther and farther away from the authentic, and you might even start to question if there is, that authentic emotion, and you're just like, there's no path out, like down, right?
And you get further and further away from the connection,
from the truth. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. You get further away from the truth.
Yep.
Every single cycle.
Every cycle.
Yes.
Perfect. All right. How about motivation? Let's move on to that one. Is there a little slide for that one, or do you want to just chit chat about this one?
Yeah, we can just chat about that one.
Okay.
So the motivation, this one is crazy. And I noticed Ryan Cameron actually put in, please explain how nice is counterfeit. There it is.
We've had a podcast on that one. It's a good one.
Make sure you listen to that podcast, because it's really good.
It is.
And there's some amazing comments. But let's talk about motivation in the sense of nice. It turns out nice is the counterfeit of kind. Kind is the authentic emotion. Nice is always at arm's length. Nice is always back here. But you know what? I got a smile on.
Bless your heart.
And bless her.
Bless your heart.
That is a perfect nice statement. Or the spinach in the teeth, or the broccoli in the teeth, and nobody mentions. That's nice, because you don't want to embarrass them. But is it kind? Because that means now they're embarrassed in front of 10 other people that you could have stopped that. And so, I'm in a master class right now doing a 21-day reboot on nice versus kind, getting out of being the nice guy or the nice girl and stepping into kind. And kind is willing to rock the boat. So going back to motivation, right? What is the motivation? The motivation with nice is often conflict avoidance. I am going to avoid this conflict by being this super nice person by being so nice that you're not going to be able to be upset at me or have any conflict whatsoever. Whereas kind is willing to lean in. Kind is willing to lean in and have hard conversations. So the motivation behind kind is truly conflict resolution versus conflict avoidance. So looking at that motivation, what is the motivation behind my actions? Well, in the case of nice versus kind, and nice has a whole bunch of motivations, but that's one of the primary ones, is conflict avoidance, not to look bad, to put on this persona that then everybody interacts with your persona and never interacts with your soul.
Right.
Kind is willing to sit in those hard emotions. Kind is willing to have hard conversations. Kind is willing to do all of that in love so that you do talk heart to heart. You talk soul to soul, and that's kind. And it's been so fun doing this masterclass because the transformations that are happening, the light bulbs that go off every single day are incredible. It's so neat to see lives being transformed. They're not being the doormat anymore. They're not being the placater, the people pleaser. They're stepping into their own power and saying, okay, it's time for me to be kind, and kind starts here.
Right.
And
go ahead.
I think we have to be thoughtful about, like, there are people who I remember being in a little bit of a chat about nice isn't a bad thing. And a lot of people, and I think it really comes down to the semantics or how we define nice versus kind, because there are people who think nice is a good word. It's a nice thing to be. And to be perfectly honest, it's better than being mean. Like, being nice is, it's a journey towards kind. It's better. But I think we just have to understand that when we're talking about nice, we're defining it as something that in and of itself is more selfish. And it's like you said, it's conflict avoidant. And so, like, we're not trying to necessarily redefine the words that someone else might understand, but that's how we're using that. That's kind of what we're talking about here. Because I just, like I said, I remember a follow-up chat in one of the groups where lots of people were like, I disagree. Nice is good. And so I'm like, well, you just have to understand in the context, we're kind of comparing the two. And kind, as you said, is it resolves conflicts instead of avoids conflicts. And it is, there's that connection. So anyway, I wanted to point that out because I know we have had some conflict on that, just defining nice as and not an authentic, as a counterfeit. So
can I just want to kind of throw this in there. This is my own, kind of opinion on this. I like the idea of having it as a counter emotion. However, I sometimes look at nice too as maybe like the lesser law of being kind, maybe, so maybe it's not necessarily counterfeit, but it's just, I'm going to be nice to somebody walking down the street. I might hold the door to them and I don't know this person. Right. And maybe that's just a step for me. Like, once I get to know them and I'm like sitting on a bench having this soul to soul moment, maybe that's when I'm starting to feel kind towards them. Nice is just kind of something I do and don't think about. Kind is kind of just what more emanates from me. I don't know. I kind of feel
like if you're going to open the door for that individual, I think that's you being kind,
because
you don't have an ulterior motive as to why you're opening that door. It's not like, oh, I'm opening this door so everyone will see that I'm opening this door for this person. That's
look
kind.
how gracious
That's nice.
I am.
Yeah. This is like, it's genuinely a kind part of you that's opening up that door for the individual. Nice is when the inside doesn't necessarily match your outside. Like, your action doesn't match your intention or your motivation.
Okay, well, I'm going to be honest. Like, some of the people I hold the door open for, I'm not real thrilled about holding the door open for them. You know what I mean?
Nice.
Like, there are times when I'm like, okay, I'll hold the door for you because it's the right thing to do. But honestly, right now, I'd rather go through first and then just shut it. You know what I mean? Like, I just sort of think that, like, to me, like, I'm trying to just visualize this in my head. Like, I like your last diagram that you had with the swirling different emotions. And I think sometimes that leads to, like, I can kind of almost see some of those as a stepping stone to get to where the real emotion is, but if I'm looking at this as a lust versus love sort of thing, I sort of think lust just doesn't really care all that much. It's sort of like those, like it is a counterfeit, right? Like I'm going to go and I might be nice. Like, let me just say I'm out in the world, right? I'm picking up somebody at a bar and I want to like have a fun night with this person. I'm going to go be nice. What's that?
Do you do this often, Everett?
Only on like the third weekend of the month. The rest of the time, like it's, I'm too busy. So, but if I'm going to do something like that, right, I'm going to go, I'll be nice to the person, but it's lust, right? Like I just want that night and then I'm gone. Like I don't care to make the connection like you had talked about in the first one. I don't care to take those emotions further or be genuine with them, which is the counterfeit part, right? But to me, I feel like I could, if I wanted to step up the game, I guess, I don't even know how to say that. Like I could turn those emotions into something, like I could turn my niceness into something that becomes kind. Does that make sense? I don't even know if it's rattling around in my head a lot better than it's coming out of my mouth, which is often the case. So maybe it's just we move on, but.
And we have discussed this on a different podcast, and we can go back to that later, but let's move on and just really quick and do valuation, and then we can get into the lust versus love.
Yeah. So, and just on that last point, I actually, let's jump back to the slides and I'll just very briefly show. So this diagram, kind is not mean. And it's so funny when I teach nice is the counterfeit of kind, that that people are like, oh, good, I don't have to be nice anymore. I'm going to go tell off my ex. I'm going to just let him have it. And it's like, no. We're missing the point that nice, if you look at the pendulum, the opposite of uncentered is still uncentered. It's not, the kind is in the middle. Nice, talking about motivation, nice has a motivation of, believe it or not, manipulation is huge in nice. Honesty. Nice is not honest because I've got all these emotions inside and I'm being nice, so I'm not going to share my emotions. And so the opposite of uncentered is still uncentered.
Exactly.
And kind is where we find center. Kind is where we find that middle place where we are grounded. And just like Everett was saying, kind does open the door because that's your value. Nice opens the door because I should. And we talked about should. I should, therefore I'm going to do it, whether or not I want to. Kind always starts here and says, what do I want? And I know that's not our topic for tonight. And so I want to make sure we jump over to love versus lust. Yes. But I think that's a really important distinction, is especially with nice versus kind, is that motivation is one of the key factors in nice. What's my motivation? Am I doing this to get something? Nice always has strings attached. Kind is unattached. Kind says, I'm going to do this for you and I'm going to leave it there. There's nothing I'm looking for reciprocated. I just want to do this because this is my value. I value you. I value this act. It's not because I should. It's not because I'm trying to make you do something for me. It's simply because I am doing it out of love and surrender. So
yeah, great. Thank you. And I do love that, those two comparisons. Like that is a good battle to be fought. Always a good one. But do you want to just quickly give a rundown on valuation, since we at least want to finish those?
Yes.
We'll move
on. So valuation says, does this emotion tap into my divinity? Am I divine? Is this emotion telling me I'm divine? And is it telling me you're divine? And love versus lust, this one is huge. This is such a huge part of love versus lust, is that valuation and how love values versus how lust values.
Right. You know what? And since I'm so technically savvy in my world, I did find I know this should be up on the screen, but I couldn't figure out how to get it there. So you guys are going to bear with me. I did find on psychcentral.com. I wanted to look up the definition of love versus lust. And I just want to read this, and I'm sure it's going to be exactly what you're going to go down. but I want to just give people kind of an overview of what the differences are real quick. It says lust is mainly sexual or physical with no desire to bond with the person on a deeper level. Love, in contrast, involves feelings of intimacy, vulnerability, and putting in the effort to build a stronger connection, which was, again, one of your spots there. So as Everett was saying earlier, there is that kind of, I don't want anything beyond this moment. This is just a pure sexual thing. Whereas love is definitely more of a caring for, attentive kind of emotion. But go ahead. I want to hear what you have to say.
Wow, that was fantastic. Very nicely done.
I'll
Yeah.
feel it.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much for that. So yeah, going to the definition of what is love versus lust. If you look at it, the Greeks define love in 4 terms. The Greeks define love in there's actually 8, but there's 4 that are the common ones. And so if I can describe what those are, let me see here, make sure I've got them in the right place. There we go. Okay, so going back, let's jump over here. Here we go. All right, so there's 4 types of love. According to the Greeks, there's philia, which is friendship love. So the love that you feel for your best friend, there's a love there. Then there's storge. Storge is familial love. So the love of a parent to a child and vice versa, the love of a brother and a sister, that familial love that is a very strong bond. It's an amazing connection. And then there's eros. Eros is the romantic love, and that's the one we're going to talk about tonight, is eros. And then finally, agape. And agape is what we would think of as charity. Agape is Christ-like love. And so they actually break it down into the 4 different categories, and I think that's really critical. And one little side note is, if you look at the 4 types of love, the only way to accomplish all 4 types of love with a connection is through marriage. Marriage is the only way to get all 4 of those into one package.
One little package. Wow, that's kind of cool. And I do have to throw this in here. I do feel jaded that we in English do not, have all the different love options.
We just have one.
Everything's love, but I love the separations. It helps clarify, right? And I do love how those all come in to the family and into the marriage and the unit between the two. So that's amazing. Awesome.
Yeah. So tonight we're going to talk about the difference between eros or romantic love and lust, because you can, 2 people can put their lips to each other's lips. And they can do that, going back to the 3rd criteria, motivation. Mm-hmm. The 3rd criteria says, I'm going to do this in the spirit of unity, in the spirit of connection, in the spirit of bonding, or same action, same lips. The lips didn't change. The person didn't change. Nothing changed except for, I'm going to take. And one thing that is really important to know about love is that love gives and love receives. Lust only takes. Love gives and love receives. I loved your definition. You're going to have to send me that. I love that definition because it talked about vulnerability. There's actually 2 sides of love. Mm-hmm. One is giving, the other is receiving, meaning that I accept your offering. I accept this into me, and I'm going to receive this gift you've given me. Lust, oh no. Lust says, you're an object, and because you're an object, I'm going to take. I'm going to take from you. And you cannot lust if you view someone as a child of God. You cannot. You cannot lust after someone when you see them as a child of God. When you see them in their divinity, you can't lust after them because they're no longer an object.
Mm.
Now they're human. Now they're just like you, a divine soul, a child of God. And you can't lust when you see someone as that. Yes, lust is always preceded by objectification.
Crazy. Awesome.
And could I share a story that
Absolutely.
illustrates
Yeah.
so well? I was at a singles event, so I'm currently single, but so
Currently not for long, but
engaged. The most amazing woman that I've ever met. She is incredible. So centered, so kind, so beautiful. So I was at a singles event. This is before I met Patty, and I was talking with someone, and he starts talking about his friend, and he's like, "Oh, he's so stupid. He was dating this girl," and he pulls up the phone, and he shows me a picture of this absolutely gorgeous woman, and he used some very interesting terminology. He said, "This guy's so stupid. He just lost her. I can't believe that. Like, look at that. Look at that. He lost that. Can you believe he lost that?" And I immediately heard that was no longer a person. That was this object of glorified beauty. That was nothing more than a book, a hat. It was, the divinity was gone. Because in order to lust, you have to objectify.
You have to objectify.
And
sorry. Go ahead.
It's the same thing with hate. You cannot hate someone unless you first turn them into an object. You cannot hate a child of God. You have to first morph them into an object, and then you can hate the object. You can't hate them as an eternal soul.
That's interesting. I've never stopped to think about that. But when you were talking about the objectification, every time I hear that type of topic brought up, the whole "look at, he lost her" kind of thing, or lost that, it reminds me of this thing went viral a couple of years ago where they took men and they kind of put him in this this little place where they were flashing pictures in front of them, and they had little things attached to them so they can rate where their brain waves are and all that stuff. Anyway, they were talking about they would show pictures of their kids and show pictures of their mom and show pictures of whoever, people that they really loved and and they found endearing, and the levels of whatever they were watching were just in that love area, right? This was someone they felt affectionate for. This was someone they loved. And then they started throwing up pictures of really beautiful women, maybe in swimsuits, maybe not. And automatically things shifted to that object area of the brain versus the love affection. It went to that is something I want, something I want versus someone that I need. And it was just so amazing, not amazing in a good way, but it was like,
revealing.
Yeah. And so these guys, they were shown after and they felt horrible, but it's almost like they've been kind of, or not, this is just not a guy thing, but we're kind of being molded to lust versus love, because I think you're right. Love takes more. You have to give. You have to be willing to receive. You've got to be willing to be vulnerable. You have to be willing to put someone else before you. Like, there's so much that's involved with love that, again, I think Satan's hijacking that. And he's just like, nope, you just want something to make you feel like good. So,
and can we talk for a minute about the idea of lust and attraction? Because I feel like we sometimes give the message in the church that a feeling of attraction is lust and it's evil. And I think we have to be really careful about that, because I think that those feelings of attraction they're necessary in that romantic love. It's part of that. But again, it's the giving and taking and not objectifying. But I think we have to be really careful that, we don't make any kind of attraction into lust and therefore it's all evil, because I think we sort of damage relationships if people feel like attraction is not good, because it's important. It's an important part of that, and it's very good in the right circumstances. So
Yeah.
Yes, it does. No, but I do agree with I've seen that in a lot of the LDS singles groups, where if somebody is interested in someone who is rather good looking or has a rather nice body for a male or female, people automatically will just tag it as lust. And it's like, that's, first of all, that's unfair, because that person you're looking at, you've just objectified them and said that they aren't, worthy of love because of the way they look. So I do agree. I think that is a hard balance. And I think it's important that we realize that those feelings, those attractions are innate and they're there for a good purpose, as long as we keep it connected to humanity, to a child of God, and treat them in a way that they should be treated versus an object.
Yeah.
I think this can be a very tricky one for singles, especially as guys, because that's sort of our first impression, right? Like a girl walks into a room, and as a guy, let's say you're a single guy, no relationships, you're not engaged, Curtis, or whatever, right? You go to a dance, and probably the first thing you're going to do is like, oh, that girl looks cute over there, right? Now that's, if you just go down that line, like she's all I'm interested in is how she looks, and you go and dance with her once and she's got the personality of like a honey badger in heat, right? She's just angry all the time, or like just bitter. You're like, okay, but I still like the way she looks, so let's keep going. At that point, are you looking at the right things, right? Like, are you going down the right road? Like you said, are you looking at this, or are you looking at the deeper things? Like, man, having a conversation with this person is like awful. It's like jumping into a patch of cactuses, right? But some people will do that regardless, because they think this person looks good. And so that's the lust part. But that's a hard thing for some guys to turn off and just be like, well, she's so cute that I'll overlook all that other stuff. And I have heard guys say, you can change the personality, but you can't change the way they look, And so at that point,
I feel like it's the other way around.
I know.
It's totally opposite.
Well,
but
look, I'm not saying I agree with it. Okay. But I'm telling you, like, guys, when guys are in the hunt or whatever, dating, looking for somebody, whatever you want to say, this is kind of the first impression. And if you let that first impression continue going, instead of saying, okay, that's step one, what's step two? Are we going to go deeper with this? What's their personality like? Can we have that, like you had talked about, the connection, right? Can we start going down these paths and find out if this person's compatible? That's when you take that initial feeling and either turn it into something better, or just kind of turn it into like a lustful desire. Like, well, I don't care about all that other stuff. She's hot, right? Like, let's get to know each other, even though you don't care to get to know me or whatever. That's all I care about.
Well, and I think what we have to be careful of is, I don't think people should feel shamed for finding someone attractive. Amen. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. But I do think, like, I remember I had a friend years ago who said he doesn't really bother to get to know a girl unless he finds her attractive. Like, and there was a part of me that was like, that just seems wrong. But in truth, he does get to know her if he finds her attractive. It's not like, Everett just described, where he doesn't really care about her. He just thinks she's attractive and wants the arm candy. He does work on getting to know her and figure out, is this compatible? And I mean, he dated some really beautiful girls that he didn't ultimately end up with. So I think that it's okay to say, my first impression of someone is, wow, they're beautiful. But I think where you run afoul is when you don't care about all of the rest, because she could just keep chattering on and make being nonsensical if I can just keep looking at her. I mean, that's where you get into trouble.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a fine line there, but I don't think there's anything wrong with having a physical reaction to someone and finding them attractive and so on. And I think that sometimes we do give people a bad rap for that. But I think
Joyce.
yeah.
Preach.
Okay, so let me ask you a question then, Curtis. We're talking about guys and kind of the physical attraction and all this. Would you say that lust is more prevalent in guys then than in girls? Because we are geared more towards the physical appearance and those sort of things.
So this has actually been studied, and
all right,
yeah, and it's proven men do have a stronger physical attraction than women. And I'm so glad you brought this up, Joyce, because because this is such an important issue, is that attraction is not bad. It is not bad. And just like you were talking about Everett.
That's okay. I've been called worse.
That's all right. That's my nickname for him. So.
Just like you were talking about Everett, you go to the singles dance and you're like, who am I attracted to? That's an important piece. That's a really important piece of a relationship, is you need to be attracted to the person. And sure. I want to take a look. Well, before I jump to the transition on this, to intimacy, and we'll talk about intimacy, but I want to address two things. One is let go of any shame about being attracted to someone. That's human. That's natural. That's part of what God put inside us.
I think the people who create that shame are the people who feel like they are not as attractive. And so they kind of push that down a little bit. Like, you should not be focusing so much on the attractive. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And the flip side is true too, is people that are incredibly attractive. I've seen this firsthand several times. Their initial assumption is that everyone just lusts after me. Mm-hmm. And that isn't healthy either. Neither side of that is.
Well, that's vanity, right? Oh, I just know what people think about me. They think I'm awesome. So
yeah. And
right.
Oftentimes, like, let's just say a woman will be say, people just lust after me. They just want me for my looks and my body and all these things. And that may be true, that they're in their experience, they've felt that. And we've all gone on one too many dates with that really good looking person. We all did that. We were like, you know what? Oh, she's so good looking. I'm just going to go on one more just to make sure. And then you go out with the honey badger that lives in the cactus field. And
yeah. Like, oh. They're there. They exist. Trust me.
Yeah. And so with that, that is probably where that assumption comes from. Oh, people just want me for my body. And that is really unhealthy. And this is where the transition comes into. And I'd love to talk about intimacy. Mm-hmm. And intimacy is way more than just sexual. And there's an amazing definition of intimacy that I love. It's breaking apart the word. Instead of intimacy, it says, into me, see. Into me, see. Intimacy is not just sexual. Intimacy is emotional. Intimacy is spiritual. Intimacy is even financial. You can look into their finance. There's so many levels of intimacy. And you've got to balance. If your sexual intimacy is here, and your spiritual intimacy is here, and your emotional intimacy is here, you're out of balance. And if we're teetering on top of that sexual intimacy, and you don't have anything else to support the other sides, it will fall. Mm-hmm. It will. But if we're willing to see into others, see into them in a space of vulnerability. And just like you said, Everett, it's great to be attracted to that person at the dance. And if you're like, oh, honey badger cactus, and you keep going back and back and back, that's not intimacy. That's trying to build this sexual plank here, the sexual pillar, and leaving all the rest out. And one that often surprises people is physical intimacy. Physical intimacy is very different than sexual intimacy. And people bunch those together. They put them together and say, oh, it's just the same thing. No. You can hold someone's hand in a very secure, warm, beautiful space that isn't sexual, but it's so connecting. It's so connecting. And so building those platforms, raising all the pillars together creates true intimacy across all the planes. If we're just building the sexual intimacy and leaving off the others, then we've got a very unsteady foundation. And that's often, if you look and you say, okay, how intimate are we on the spiritual? Do I really know my partners or my girlfriend or boyfriend or spouses? Do I know what they really believe? Have we had those deep conversations? There's intellectual intimacy. Have we gone deep on stuff? Are we able to have those conversations? There's so many levels of intimacy that if your sexual intimacy is up here, if you get together and all you do for 8 hours is kiss, then there's probably an imbalance, and there's probably a lot of lust in there.
Okay, you're talking to a lot of people right now who are in dating relationships that's as far as they can go. And they're like, what?
They're like,
are you telling me I shouldn't be doing this? Come on, Curtis. You're just blowing my Saturday night life here,
The answer is yes. You spend time on all the other pillars.
Exactly. You know what I love? I love how you pointed out there's physical intimacy and sexual intimacy. And one reason, because a lot of people do the love languages, right? And a lot of men come up with physical intimacy or physical touch as their love language.
Yeah.
As do some women like myself. But the truth is if you read the book and if you've done the research on that, the physical touch is actually not, it includes sexual intimacy, but a majority of that is more of a physical intimacy, touching, hugging, holding hands, back rubs, feet rub, whatever, scrubbing, rubbing heads, whatever, whatever you feel for that skin on skin or that touch that's needed to feel the intimacy that's non-sexual. And as women, we love having the non-sexual intimacy because that helps us feel firm, feel secure, feel loved, so that the sexual intimacy is that much more powerful and ready and vulnerable. Because I think a lot of women lack the physical intimacy. And so then the relationship lacks the sexual intimacy. And men kind of don't understand the difference between those two. But I'm glad that you're kind of bringing that up, that it is more when you're talking physical intimacy, it is not necessarily a sexual intimacy. So that'll help all you guys out there dating. Start being physically intimate, not necessarily sexually intimate.
Yeah, and physical intimacy even extends beyond touch. Physical intimacy is going on a run together and experiencing that physical exertion, or going on a hike, or working out together, or experiencing different physical sensations together, that bond you, that connect you. It's physical intimacy is so much broader and is separate from sexual intimacy. And I love what you said, Celeste. I love what you said, is that women, if you want, like, as a man, if you want to truly find that connection, is build the other pillars first before looking at that sexual intimacy. Build those first and really get into all of that before, get to know their soul before you get to know their lips.
Oh,
this goes out specifically exactly what Curtis said to all the guys who connect with some girl on Facebook or something and immediately want to jump into the deep end of the pool, start talking intimacy. No bueno. Anyways, go ahead. Sorry,
I think you're absolutely correct on that. I think that within the LDS singles realm, especially post-divorce on a lot of people, they're like, can I not do that at the same time? Can I be building them simultaneously? Because they were like, I do want to, have those, intimate moments that aren't going to take away temple recommends. Obviously, we don't recommend that, but the physical interaction and those intimate moments that can be done without going too far while you're learning and growing and understanding and building the other pillars. I do agree, though, that sometimes people probably see this a lot if they're therapists or whatever, where, the relationship was purely sexual and by nature to begin with. And then when the other two sides didn't meet up with the height of that, or even if got near it, it does teeter. And I think a lot of times people are like, we had a really good sex life, but nothing else worked. And, I didn't feel connected. I didn't feel understood. She complained all the time. I couldn't do anything right, whatever, but yet they're always like, I don't know. We had a great sex life though. But I think that's what you're saying, is that one pillar was firm and built, but the other ones were not.
Well, and the problem is that I think sometimes there are things that happen and the sex life goes away, at least temporarily. There are various physical reasons or whatever. And when you lose that and there's nothing left, you can't succeed. So
Joyce, I'm so glad you said that, because, if your foundation, if you're teetering on this one pillar and then that pillar goes away,
crashes down,
the whole thing is gone. Yeah. If you have a pillar here and a pillar here, and you have multiple pillars, and then that goes away, guess what? Your foundation is solid. Your foundation stays up.
Rebuilding that pillar is much more likely if you have that foundation in place.
Other one's holding up.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Yeah.
It becomes difficult, though, just going along with what Celeste was saying a minute ago. Once you've been in a marriage, you're kind of used to a level of connection, of intimacy and building relationships that you don't find if you've never been married, right? Then building those typically on an intimate level is much different. So if you're married and divorced, it becomes much harder to kind of scale that back and say, well, this is how we were connecting and building intimacy before, but now I've got to go to a much simpler kind of area here and kind of build off of those connections. And I think some people struggle with that, to be honest with you. And I don't know that it's a lust thing. I think that they are just simply going off of, sometimes, this is what I know, intimacy, this is how you grow in relationships together. And turning that off again can be difficult.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because when you're in that relationship, in a marriage where you do have that sexual intimacy as a regular part of your daily interactions, it is hard to turn that off. And one
daily interactions, Curtis. All right, man. I'm just saying, daily. That's pretty good. All right. I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
Weekly, monthly. All right.
Let's take notes.
You made him blush.
Let's say regular. Sorry, in your Curtis. Regular interactions.
Okay. All right. Well, just
if that's the case, then it is hard to go. One really great way, and I love giving people this challenge. One really great way is to see what levels of intimacy you're at, is to spend a week not touching. Ooh. Spend a full week not touching at all. And if at the end of the week you're stronger as a couple, you're solid, that's love. If at the end of the week you're like, whoo, oh boy, either I have to go into this mania of I have to touch you as soon as I see you, or like, ooh, I'm not really interested in this person. That's a pillar of lust way up here that is not love. And it's so fascinating. I want to be sensitive of our time, but there's some brain science behind love and lust as well. And you talked about the fMRI study. I've read that study. I've researched that. Dr. Andrew Huberman has some fascinating information about dopamine and what happens in the act of intimacy, in being sexual with your partner. And specifically, let me get really clear, with your marriage partner, that I'll talk about two different things. But I have a friend that played in the NFL, and his team, the not the head coaches, but other coaches, would encourage them to go find prostitutes before a game. And they would actually discourage them from sleeping with their wives. And there's brain science behind this.
Did your friend play for the Oakland Raiders?
Yes.
I'm just asking. Okay, anyway, sorry.
He's not going to open his mouth.
Just curious. All right. Sounds like an Oakland Raider move. Just saying.
Because there's brain science behind this. When we are sexually intimate, when we engage in the act of marriage, specifically marriage, then dopamine spikes through the roof. Dopamine in our brains goes way, way up. And what happens is that every time there's a dopamine spike, there's a dopamine drop. And we think, okay, spike, drop, come back to zero. That's not what happens. Dopamine spike, drop below zero, and then we have to actually come back up to get back to that baseline. In marriage, what happens is that after that dopamine spike and after the drop, there's other drugs that are kicking into our brain. Oxytocin, the cuddle drug, right? Oxytocin is saying, hey, you just had this amazing experience. You know what? Your dopamine is here, but your oxytocin is way up here. And your serotonin, all of these drugs that connect us, they come after the dopamine, or kind of simultaneously. But when the dopamine is down here and you're feeling that lack of dopamine, guess what? All the others are up here. When you do that with someone other than your spouse, when you do that in lust, with in the football player's case, of prostitute or whatever, the dopamine spikes, the dopamine drops. There aren't the other drugs. They don't kick in. And what happens is there's this huge lack. And that creates rage. That creates the other emotions that kick in at that point. And so lust is so damaging in that sense that you're not getting the other drugs that come with marriage. You're getting a void. You're getting this drastic drop in dopamine way below baseline, and you have to have more. And that's why these football players are like, I have to have more dopamine. I'm either going to get that by bashing somebody's head in, or I'm going to let rage take over, and that's good for football too, or all of these things. And so the science behind love and lust is very different. But the crazy thing is, it's a counterfeit. It acts and feels and looks like the original. And that's why we really have to get into those 4 criteria: the connection, the direction, the motivation, the valuation. And with valuation, do you truly see that other person as a child of God, as someone divine that you get to share this experience with, rather than take from them?
Yeah. Wow, that's pretty powerful. I didn't know about that. I mean, I knew there was a lot of hormones that are, to do with sexual encounter and stuff, but I was trying to figure out where you were going with that with the football one. But it makes sense. I mean, if they are lacking all the others and they are stuck in rage and stuck in, how am I going to get this dopamine back? I mean, is that not like a perfect example as to what, again, in my opinion, what Satan would want? He doesn't want us filled with the other positive thing, whatever he said, serotonin and all those other ones.
The cuddle.
The cuddle.
What'd you call the cuddle drug?
Hormone.
The cuddle drug.
Yeah, the cuddle drug. I'm still trying to figure out what the I need a sandwich drug is, but okay. I'm sure that's in there somewhere.
It's in there.
It's the hamatocin.
Yeah, they're a
Yeah.
ham and cheesetosin. Yes.
Honey Hamilton.
Anyway, just think it's interesting that Satan recognizes that if he puts you in certain situations and if he encourages people to be put in certain situations, that in the end, the reaction or the where he leaves you when it's done is in a negative downward spiral. Like that's just where he wants us. And there's no growth there. There's nothing but contention and anger. And, I got to go out and do something else to get things back up. And again, it becomes like what you're saying, it becomes then a cycle. Well, if I need to get more to fill this rush, then I guess I got to go do what I just did again to get what and it becomes this vicious cycle that, like you say, if it's seen from the side is just a downward spiral. So just that's eye-opening. I loved that football analogy. I thought that was great.
Yeah. And the reason they didn't want them to have intimacy with their wives is because oxytocin does kick in. And that, now I'm just this big teddy bear and I just want to cuddle you and I feel content and I feel peaceful. And you know what? I'm going to go get that sandwich that everyone was talking about. It's this, all of a sudden the happy drugs are there. You don't want a happy football player. You don't want a cuddly football player. You want somebody that's going to, pound somebody. And so that really illustrates the difference between love versus lust on a chemical or a neuroscience level.
Well, and Curtis, you said in the beginning that the one emotion that does not have a counterfeit is peace. But then you just said, like, in this situation, in a marital intimacy, it does, like all of these other things, brings you to a place of peace. So, like, I think that's actually kind of beautiful that act of intimacy in that committed, marriage relationship gets you to that ultimate pure emotion of peace. So,
ooh, I like that.
Yeah. And I really like how you said that, Joyce. There is no stronger connection than intimacy and true love. Mm-hmm. There isn't. There's none. And the exact opposite is true, that there's such a disconnection in lust. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's the counterfeit.
Wow. Well, I think your football analogy is interesting because it sounds exactly like when the kids are hungry and you just give them a bunch of sugar, right? Like they feel okay for a little bit, but then they crash harder and they're hungrier. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of the same principle, but you're giving them something counterfeit to fulfill that need rather than what they truly need. So,
yeah,
very interesting.
All right. Gosh, thank you, Curtis. I know you had two other like comparisons that we were going to chit chat about, but you know what? This one, we got love versus lust. So it was a good one. So, and that's always, every time you come on, you've got your list and we're like, yeah, we're going to do it. But we like to talk. So, but thank you. Thank you so much for coming on. And for those of you who are watching right now, this is going to be a 3-part podcast. So this is just part 1. Curtis is going to be back next week and the following week, and we are going to do more of his counterfeit emotions. So go ahead and visit him online. We've got that down at the bottom right now, ticking across if you want more information on counterfeit emotions. Thank you, Curtis, for joining us. Thank you for just sharing this amazing concept with us. And of course, we wish you the best of luck with your book. And again, I get the first copy. We've talked about this many times before. And
I think you and Katie were going to arm wrestle or something.
Oh, poor Katie. She got booted on here on accident and she never came back. So I feel bad, but okay.
Hey, let me just say real quickly too, if you saw the ticker at the bottom for the Facebook group, it's like some gigantic number. I'm assuming you can go in and type in counterfeit emotions in the search. You'll probably have a better luck than trying to get the, secret lottery number that was at the bottom there. That doesn't come through too good.
In the Facebook group, you just type in counterfeit emotions in Facebook and you'll find the group. It's got the blue head and all the dots around it. In that group, you'll get resources, you'll get access to the master classes that we're doing. Like I said, right now we're doing nice versus kind. And so you'll get resources there. I'm actually going to be launching the book in phases through the Facebook group. So if you want to be a pre-reader, you can actually join. And I just saw Terry Gridley just joined. Thanks, Terry. Yeah, join the Facebook group. That's the best place to find all the resources for Counterfeit Emotions.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you. And I appreciate you coming on again. We love having you on. And thank you, Joyce and Everett, for being with us. And for those of you who are interested in the after party, I just put the link in the chat. So we will see you in about 5, because we do a little wrap up after. We'll see you over there. But again, thanks everyone. And we will see you next week.
Thanks again, Curtis.
Thank you. Thanks, Curtis.